Good evening and welcome to the family of Yad Veshuv, friends. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking the director of Yad Veshuv, Rabbi Yomin Klepner, and to wish him Chazak ve'ematz. He should only go from strength to strength and achieve his very wide-ranging, correctly defined goals. Friends, we are Yad Veshuv is looking at two completely distinct population groups. We're looking at people who have volunteered to serve Hashem as coming completely from the outside, Geirim, people who have converted. And also we're looking at people who have born from Jewish people, who are, for whatever reason, gone astray, come back, Baalei Teshuvah. And each of these are people who need a guidance, need direction, need to be somehow eased along in their path of serving Hashem.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Now, there's a popular misconception that people have, and that is that if a person's coming in from the outside, he looks upon himself as if he's come in, he's made it. And in a sense, he has. He has made it. He's traveled a long way. A person who comes from the outside and has broken away from family, from friends, from community, from belief system, from everything that he was trained to do as a child, and bravely volunteered to serve Hashem, he's moved a long way up the mountain. And nevertheless, he's laboring under a misconception. He thinks that now that he's accepted, he's gone to the mikveh, he's accepted Torah, he's in. Parallel to him, the one who, Jewish but uninformed, untrained, has also moved a long way. He's moved from where he was in a totally secular environment, broken away from all of that environment, taken the decision to recognize that Avodas Hashem, that's it, and moved away with great cost, initial cost, socially and family-wise, to taking on all of Torah mitzvahs. Of course, he's going to be rewarded later by by the benefits, but it's a long path that he's already trod. And both of these people are laboring under misconception. The truth is that when a person converts and becomes Jewish, it's the beginning of a path. And when a person becomes a Baalei Teshuvah, it's the beginning of a path. He's not merely he's not merely, now he's arrived. And my observation has been that very often, that's the situation. Often we find that a person who has given up the belief of the religions that we have not accepted, that are totally rejected, and he has rejected them too. And now he's changed his belief for the emes, so he's arrived. He's got the emes. He's got the truth. And he doesn't realize that there are tremendous needs of community, tremendous needs of starting to learn Torah, beginning to work with his family, with himself, with his own ways of reacting in 1,000 different ways to situations that The person who has years of tradition knows how to deal with, and he does not yet know, not just in terms of what to do on a Friday night and where you dip the salt, and how you keep the traditional customs, but at a deeper level. To now bring his responses, his personal responses to situations, his midos, in line with the Jewish nation. And don't forget that the Jewish nation has had hundreds, thousands of years of training, and he's coming now from the outside. And heroic and great as his act is, he's still lacking these training background influences. And the same is true for the person who is born Jewish, not to the same extent, but also he's come in. Now he's starting from the bottom line, and he has to work his way up. What others had years before learned in cheder, in yeshiva, and now he's got to fill the gap. And that filling the gap is actually the beginning of a pathway. When Klal Yisrael arrived at the Promised Land, only then did they have to start conquering, settling, building a Beis HaMikdash. Eventually, after hundreds of years, being Zocher to kings and the Beis HaMikdash, and it was a process that took generations to arrive in Eretz Yisrael as the original plan was. So, what then is the way of defining a successful person who has moved in late from the outside? And the answer is very simple. The answer is, if he understands the meaning of growth in Torah, he's in, and happily in. Because Torah is not having arrived at an address, please correct my post office box from this address to another address in Israel in a religious community. But it's entering into a venture, like a person takes on a university course of 6 years. He knows he's got to arrive someplace. It's a venture of growth. And if we understand that actually he has the advantage, and I've said this to my students in Cape Town many, many years ago, from you I expect more, because you've already leapfrogged so far from where you were to where you're today. It's not asking you a lot now to leapfrog further. People who have perhaps been born into the system and are not aware that it's growth are at a disadvantage that you don't have. You actually know that growth is involved and movement is involved and happy change is involved. And when you do that, you're in, because you're going to succeed. So it's growth. It's the desire to serve Hashem from where we are and move in Avodas Hashem. Now, if we take the model of somebody who is sitting in a yeshiva and studying Torah, one of the first words we learn in a yeshiva is the word steigen. Steigen means growing in learning. And if you're sitting in front of the Gemara, at first it seems like, it's just so difficult and everything doesn't hang together. And as you go further and further, suddenly it starts clicking, and suddenly you start understanding, and suddenly you start asking questions and giving good answers, and before you turn around and you know it, after a couple of years, you're in the system. You've grown. But that's not all. You've got to cover one Masechta, and then another Masechta, and another Masechta. You're steiging all the time. Learning Torah means steiging. That's an obvious given. Everyone knows that. What is often forgotten is that keeping Torah is as much a steiging process as is learning Torah. There's Talmud and there's Maisa, there's learning Torah and there is fulfilling Torah. And when we recognize that it's a growth process, it's something where I'm not to be fazed by problems of resistance or problems of social difficulties. That's the name of the game. That's what it is. It's like a piece of Gemara that I'm battling with. And of course I expect to battle with the Gemara when I start learning Gemara. I didn't expect for it to be a breeze, because that's what learning Gemara is about. You get into it and you start climbing that mountain and you conquer it. You don't get fazed by what you're facing. You recognize that that is the name of what Hashem has put in front. There are people who don't always succeed, and the reason why they're not succeeding usually is either they're underplaying or overplaying. It's like driving a car with too little gas or too much. The Vilna Gaon says that siyata d'shmaya, this help that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives an individual, comes when a person does not overdo what he should be doing. He doesn't aim for a madrega that is not his own. An important Vilna Gaon in Mishlei, where the Gaon says it clearly, it's quoted in Even Shleimer as well, that to succeed in Avodas Hashem, you've got to pitch it right. You've got to pitch it where it's at. It's not a major rocket scientist decision to find where it's at. It's just honestly to define what am I really dealing with, what are my real challenges, and face them and work with them. When you do that, you're going to get enormous siyata d'shmaya. Hashem will help you to grow because Hashem wants you to grow. And that's where the siyata d'shmaya comes in. If a person feels he's not getting the siyata d'shmaya, is trying so hard, not getting the siyata d'shmaya, usually, says the Gaon, it's because he's pitched it too high. He's trying to go for something that he's not ready for. Rabbi Dessler has this beautiful mashal of a man walking around with a telescope instead of binoculars, instead of glasses. So he's focused, he sees a clear picture in front of him, and the picture is true, but it's not where he's at. It's a picture that is beyond where he's at. And he's got it so worked out, and he understands all the dynamics of it, that he thinks he's there, but he's not there. Where's the problem going to be? If you wear binoculars, my friend, and you're walking where there are pitfalls, you'll fall into them. Because the pitfalls he doesn't see. He cannot see them because his eyes are blinkered. He's seeing too far ahead. Says Rabbi Dessler, you have to know if you're studying deeper Torah than is your own madrega, you're fine. But you've always got to translate it down to your own situation and realize where you really are. Not to reach too high. And that includes, according to my Rebbe, not going too quickly for externals, which is one of the other pitfalls. The people who are coming from the outside quickly go for externals. My Rebbe was very discouraging of students in the yeshiva, including myself, of growing a beard at the early stages. And the Baalei Musa had that as a tradition. Not to encourage too many externals in Avodas Hashem before there's a stability. Ramchal was criticized by his antagonists that he didn't have a beard. Ramchal, greatest Mekubal, didn't give a beard, wasn't married. How could he be a Mekubal? He's not got a beard, he's not married. That's the one pitfall. Of course, the other pitfall is if people think it's a breeze. They think some people come in from the outside and they think that they've done God and the world a favor by now believing the truth, and that's it. And they then just say, well, I believe in Judaism, but they haven't a clue. And I've seen this overseas where people are less learned and sincere but not familiar with what Yiddishkeit really involves. I had a young lady who converted, and then she moved to a house way apart from anybody in the community, and she expected to grow in Yiddishkeit. Of course she can't. Without community, without instruction, without anything. She's just going to have a belief that happens to be true, but that doesn't help. It's not Christianity with a flip to the side of Judaism. It's a totally different picture. It's life. So there's that as well that we find sometimes, and included in that equation also is sometimes, which I find quite often, people who come in from the outside because they were loners in their path from where they were to get into Yiddishkeit. They like to sort of keep themselves to themselves quite often. And that's another serious misunderstanding of how Yiddishkeit operates. Yiddishkeit operates dafka with community, with supportive community, with input of people who are more learned than myself, people who are familiar with Torah, people who are in centers of Torah. It's a growth as part of Klal Yisrael. It's not as a growth just as an individual who has the right beliefs and even the desire to grow, but as an individual or as a hermit. And it's a tendency that one has to recognize, respect to a certain extent, because there is a certain need for independence in someone who still is unsure of his feet, but at the same time he needs to be included in the general community. So it's growth. And growth means the preparedness for whatever comes. And the happy joy that when you said, now Seva Nishma, which means I'm prepared to go for it, whatever it's going to cost, it doesn't worry me, I'm ready to take it on, and I'm serving Hashem. That now Seva Nishma is just the beginning of a path of completely new things that you had not reckoned for before. It's not something that your picture of what Yiddishkeit is about is a correct description of what's going on. Not at all. You have to be ready for something totally new. Just as the Jewish people, when they said Nasa v'Nishma, we find, Tosfos explains that there were aspects of Yiddishkeit that were unfamiliar to them, that the intensity of study of Torah, the Gemara says, Kof aleim hakegigis, that was something that they had to be repressured into after having willingly accepted the whole of Torah, because it was so out of their minds and out of their concept that they couldn't picture how much involvement Yiddishkeit really involves. So what? But they said Nasa v'Nishma. So in the end it's all included, but you didn't know how much you'd included. You'd let yourself in for something beautiful and much bigger than what you'd ever reckoned. To achieve growth, how do we view growth? Now, to grow means to understand another very simple, basic, important principle. And the principle is that my Rebbe's Yesod, the principle that my Rebbe laid down and which is so clear, he talks about the importance of a person rising, after having spent a number of years in yeshiva, rising to the challenges of taking on a position within the community, and recognizing that that position is not something that he has to take on through force of circumstances, but it's something which Hashem has planned for him as part of his life's program, which he should take full on. That's what Hashem wants him to do. And then he asks the question, why did Hashem give me this job? Maybe the other people around who could do a better job. Why me? And my Rebbe answered, and he said, it's very simple. Hashem chose you because you've got actually two jobs. The job that's at hand, and that you grow through the job into the Oved Hashem, that you should be through that job which Hashem has presented to you. So you've got a dual role. Just like King David spent the daytime in running Klal Yisrael as the king, and from 12 at night till the next morning he was writing Tehillim and singing songs to Hashem, because he had to become David HaMelech, not he was acting in the position of royalty who runs the king. He wasn't a pole, he was a tree. He was growing. He had nurturing from underneath. He had to grow as a human being, and he had to deal with his own issues that had nothing to do on the face of it with running a country. He was David Kosef Tehillim, David Naim Zmiras Yisrael. And at the same time, this is the Jewish understanding of a public role. It's totally different. It has depth that is deep as is visible on the surface. So that the person who understands takes on whatever life's challenges are in a totally different way. He's looking at not just a job to do or a job to get by with. Sometimes it becomes a job that he doesn't even want. He's just like, well, not doesn't want, but he gets sort of worn out in it. He says, yeah, well, it's so difficult and there's this problem and that problem. I suppose I have to carry on. And it becomes b'di'evet. The word b'di'evet means it's post facto. He's got no choice. He's got to. In the world of Hashem, there is no b'di'evet. Nothing is b'di'evet in Ratzon Hashem. Everything is l'katchila. It's part of Hashem's plan for you and of the entire world's population. You were chosen to be in this place at this time with this wife, with this family, with this in this community, to doing this job, and you have been chosen. Imagine you get a knock on the door, and who is there? Eliyahu Hanavi. And he says your name, and he mentions you by name, and he says, I've got a message from Hashem. You have to be at a certain place at a certain time doing a certain thing, and he defines then what you're supposed to do, and it's where you are. You would jump for joy, you'd jump out of bed every morning, and you would get going with what you've got to do, and you would run for it. It's what Hashem has chosen for me. And you put your mind to it, because you've got to grow with it. It doesn't just happen. You've got to do things that work and change and affect the changes that Hashem sent you in this world to achieve. He didn't send you in the world just to exist until your time is up. or just to do a job which others could have done equally well. We don't believe in robots. We are unique human beings. Each and every human being is unique from the time of creation until his birth, and from his birth until the end of all time. This is Torah. So you're totally unique. And as a unique person, you have your unique tafkid, what Hashem wants you to do. But it's not just doing it on the outside. It's doing it and living with it and working with it and affecting Ratzon Hashem with it. And once one recognizes that, one gives a different view to the challenges that face us. We all have challenges. There's no one without them. They don't exist. But these challenges are part of the program. That's what Hashem presented. That's what Hashem wants us to be doing. And specifically, someone who's come in from the outside at a later age, he has already got his, the space shuttle muscle. The rocket number 1 has already fired him into the stratosphere. Now rocket number 2 has to carry him further up, and rocket number 3 until he gets to his trajectory where he's got to go. He needs to take on a new rocket and move with his situation where he is at. So the challenge is to recognize this and to realize that if we look first at the Ger, the person who has in total sincerity come to join Klal Yisrael. There's an amazing Rashi. The Rashi is in Tehillim 135. In Tehillim 135 it says the different groups of bless Hashem. Beis Aaron, bless Hashem. Hearts of Levi, bless Hashem. Those who fear God, bless Hashem. Bless Hashem. Says Rashi, who are those who fear God. Interestingly enough, we have a similar psukim in other places in Tehillim, and there Rashi says the God-fearing people are the tribe of Levi who are not mentioned. But in this Tehillim it does mention the tribe of Levi, so it can't be referring to them. Who are they? Says Rashi, Elu Gerei HaTzedek, those who fear Hashem. So according to what we are understanding, they're not just they fear Hashem and therefore they've come into the system. That fear of Hashem is their hallmark for continued growth. They have to now complete that Yiras Hashem by moving forward with the same impetus of Yiras Hashem that brought them into the system to continue and grow. Because why? Because it's true, they are missing hundreds of years of training that we've been through when we were in Egypt, and then we were in this exile and that exile. It's all been working on us. Now they're missing that. So on the one side, they're bringing in their unique contribution, but on the other hand, they are missing that, all of that. So, but what is driving? Their driving force is Yiras Hashem. And that Yiras Hashem slowly but surely works them into the community and overcomes hurdle by hurdle, barrier by barrier, weakness by weakness, and builds strength until they're flowing. And even then, they continue with Yiras Hashem. And the person who's come in as a Baal Teshuvah, who's come in late into the system, I have to tell you this is a Yavniel story. I live in Yavniel, and I had someone visiting who comes occasionally to Yavniel, a young man who, a Baalei Teshuvah, and he was talking to my Rebbe, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. On one occasion, he heard a lecture from him, and he was walking him home, and he said, Rebbe, said, what you were talking in your lecture, does that apply to Baalei Teshuvah as well? So my Rebbe turned around to him and said, are you a Baal Teshuvah? He said, yes. A Baal Teshuvah? Shalom Aleichem, welcome, a Baal Teshuvah. I remember there was one Baal Teshuvah who I knew when I was young, and he was spending days and nights to compensate for everything that he'd done which he wasn't right, and he was serving Hashem with such vehemence, and you're a Baal Teshuvah? Shalom Aleichem, welcome. Now my Rebbe, when he spoke like that, knew exactly what he was saying and how he was saying it and why he was saying it. What he was making was a statement. He was saying, There are two words to describe a Baal Teshuvah, either Chozer B'Teshuvah or a Baal Teshuvah. A Chozer B'Teshuvah, a person previously didn't keep Shabbos, he keeps Shabbos, a Chozer B'Teshuvah. A person who's a Baal Teshuvah, that is a Maila. That means that's a person who is constantly working in Avodas Hashem to make the tikkun, happily, to fill the gaps, to make the tikkun. Not that he's feeling miserable or guilty, because that's not the name of the game. But he's recognizing that Hashem has given him his unique avodah to become an emes person who is using what he was not before, and he is now as a springboard for growth. So he is a Baal Teshuvah. He is being driven by his background to reach ever greater heights in Avodas Hashem and overcoming whatever hurdles are on his route. So that he's growing. For me, this was a huge chiddush. I was very grateful for this young man for having told me this, because it opened my eyes to a confusion that previously I had in this context, that there is a Maila. What you're presented with in life is actually your springboard for Maila. The Mashgiach, my Rebbe himself, once said, he said to one of his close students, he said, you think I haven't had challenges in my life, but I welcome them. He said, another opportunity for growth. My Rebbe. So that we have to move, and we have to move forward. And it's not just people who've come in late or people come from the outside. It's every single one of us. Shalom, shalom, Omar Hashem, la rachok v'la karov, Omar Hashem u'refosi. Shalom, says Hashem in the Prophet, to those who are distant and those who are near. I heal them all. We all of us have to recognize that for us to move towards this period, the period of Mashiach that we're all expectantly waiting for, it's everybody. We're all in the same boat. We all have to grow, and we all have to recognize it. Specifically, looking at people who've come in late and have already a personality that they've developed, skills that they've developed. How do they use them? The answer lies, interestingly enough, in a posuk in the Chumash where the Torah says, if you dedicate a sacrifice to Hashem, it has to be brought as a sacrifice. It may not be exchanged for another animal tomorrow. And if a person takes this animal and exchanges it for another, both become kodesh. You've dedicated this animal, and the animal you thought to exchange also becomes dedicated. Now that stands as a model. If a skill that an individual has developed, that he may never have developed had he started off within the system, for whatever reason, and there's no ways that we would have looked to send somebody from a yeshiva to study here or there or do this or that, and he comes in with that skill, then he and his exchange both become kodesh. He has to utilize that and both to serve Hashem. He's now got unique skills, and this enriches Klal Yisrael, because people are coming in from the outside now who have all sorts of skills and personalities which they have to acknowledge. You are who you are. You're not a different person because you've suddenly converted or because you suddenly decided to serve Hashem. Your personality build-up is who you are. Now you have to train yourself and teach yourself to become a reborn, but not reborn in the funny way that people think, that you suddenly take on some magic and you're reborn. Reborn is a life's process to become reborn. Each time changing something else and something else until eventually you're a different person, because you've changed so many spare parts. The Gemara in the Daf Yomi recently we had was, if you take something and you repair it often enough in different places, it becomes completely new and the old tumor disappears, because even though it never was broken, but when you look at it, all the pieces are new. That's the Gemara we learned, and it's the same. When you work on this and that, and this and that, and eventually you replace everything with quality, you're reborn. But not in a magical way, but in a real growth way. So that the skills, yes. Also, I believe, and I know, that there is Kedusha, sparks of Kedusha, according to the great teachings of the Kabbalists, in every population group. And these sparks of Kedusha come in from the outside. And they're now being integrated into Kedusha. So there is something of quality that you brought with you. that has to be developed. That's the plus side of the story. The minus side is, inasmuch as there are positive things, there are also things that need correction. There are norms, ways of behavior, attitudes that we would call, in Jewish parlance, goyish, things that do not belong. And we have to get them out of our deeper system. It's a work, it's a life's work. It's a joyous life's work. Life is a pleasure. And life is growth and challenge and happy attainment. And that's part of it. That's the place that Hashem has put you in. And this is your challenge, and rise to it and achieve and contribute to yourself and to the Jewish people and to the service of Hashem. That is for the convert. And for the person who has come in late, similar. He's gotten certain skills, certain things in his background, and certain attitudes that are positive. Certain things I want to get. Let me give you an illustration. A really good illustration. My second wife. She was a sporting person. She used to love playing tennis. She taught me how from sport you learn to be fair. Now, in my background, I actually hated cricket. The only sport really they taught us was cricket. They put me at the end of the field and they said, if and when the ball comes to your side, you've got to throw it back, and that's called fielding. So I hated fielding. It was boring, and what was going on there I didn't even see. And sport didn't speak to me very much, to be quite frank. And she introduced me to the fact that with her enriching from a background which she wouldn't have had she been born into the system, she showed me the beauty of sport. She was an artist. She showed me appreciation as an artist of the world. An artist sees the world as beautiful because an artist has to. And what did she do? Took Rabbi Victor Miller and appreciated every part of the natural world and appreciated Hashem through her eyes of beauty. That's enriching. That's enriching. So we come with that, and we come with things that have to be overcome, tendencies, attitudes, ideas that need processing. The Gemara says very profoundly in Yevomis that people who convert have to be absorbed into the body like a foreign body sometimes has to be absorbed in the body. Because there's a lot of foreign material that has to be filtered out before this new person is totally assimilated, integrated into Klal Yisrael. So, to sum up, what we've learned to recognize is that it's part of Hashem's plan that there should be conflict. I just have to say this because it fits into what we've come to learn. It's one of the reasons, says the Gemara, why the Jewish nation was sent into exile was to bring in all these souls into Klal Yisrael. These are not people who, by the way, tag along. It's part of the plan. If it's part of the plan, it's likatchila, it's God's plan. And because it's God's plan, they enrich. They're a challenge sometimes to others on the outside who have to train them, and to themselves, and that is life's challenge. This is the joy of it. But it's worth every part of it. This is the greatness of people who have, of their own, volunteered to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And people who have come in from the outside, not from the outside, but born, but come late into the system, they too are, at the end of it all, enhancing and strengthening and enriching Klal Yisrael. I just want to end with one little idea which I got from Rabbi Hutner in his Sefer, an amazing principle here. How valuable the Baalei Teshuvah is in the eyes of Hashem. Rabbi Hutner writes, the prophet Micha says, come with words alone and do tshuva. Ohaveim nedovo. I will love them with a voluntary love. Or I will love them as if they volunteered a gift to me. Says Rabbi Hutner, if somebody has not been keeping the mitzvahs and now he decides to keep the mitzvahs, he doesn't deserve a medal. Thank you very much. You were not keeping mitzvahs. Hashem said you got to do it. You're doing it. You're back on track, but that you don't deserve. But Hashem says no. Your Yetzer Hara didn't want to let you get in. And you volunteered to overcome your Yetzer Hara, then in the eyes of Shamayim it's as if you volunteered to give a gift to Hashem. Nadava. It's taken in the eyes of Shamayim like somebody who volunteers and comes in. Like the ger, which we can recognize as volunteering himself, he had no obligation. And there the Gemara really says that Avram Avinu was the father of the Gerim, and he's called Nodiv. Bas Nodiv, Mayofu Pomayich Banolim Bas Nodiv. How beautiful are the Jewish nation that have got this quality of Avram Avinu, of Nodiv, when each time they volunteer to travel to Yerushalayim 3 times a year for the festivals. They show that quality of Avram, of Nodiv. Why Nodiv? He was the one who volunteered, the father of all converts who volunteer. So a convert is volunteering, but about Tshuva also. Says Rav Hutner, Ohavei Nedava. The love that Hashem has for someone who overcomes the resistance and moves in is the same that he has for somebody who had no obligation to start with.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Along those lines. Okay, so it's not exactly on track, but if okay, so in the case of a Baalei Teshuvah whose parents are not Shomei Torah mitzvahs, it can get complicated. They can travel to that person on Shabbos or whatever. So I mean, what's then the proper shkafah to view that parent as?
Okay, that is a separate issue, which is a very, very important one, and the answer simply is the person who enters in Torah is entering into a system that gives us to be good like Hashem wants us to be good. And definitely in the 10 Commandments, Sedibros is the mitzvah of honoring parents. So parents eventually come to recognize the first fear of parents is that the child has joined some kind of a cult.
But are they Muhiv in the first place? I mean, of course they're Muhiv, but that they don't know better, that they're not volunteering. Like the Baalei Teshuvah volunteers, but the parent.
So look, what we do when we deal with anyone who is unfamiliar with Torah is treat them with a lot of respect because they don't know better. Most people, in one way or another, are Tinuk Shenishba, somebody who is not a anti, and even he's anti, he doesn't know why he's anti. He hasn't got it clear in his mind. So by the Rambam's definition, he's a Tinuk Shenishba. He's a person who knows no better, has been brought up in secular teaching and has never really been exposed to the beauty and the strength and the power of Yiddishkeit. So obviously he needs respect as a human being. He's a parent. And that's it. What we can expect of him. Our job is not to convert him, but to put him at ease and make him, in the first instance, recognize that he's got a son who is normal, who is in contact with him, and hasn't joined a cult and become crazy, but on the contrary, has become more normal in real terms, because normal means dealing with reality. And unfortunately, these parents are missing out on spiritual reality. Spirit is not part of their system, so they're actually, in a sense, less normal in the parent, and the child is more normal. And as my Rebbe said to someone who asked him, Shaila, he said, since I'm in yeshiva, Baalei Teshuvah, since I'm in yeshiva, my father doesn't want to have contact with me. What should I do? He said, are you writing home? He said, yes. So my Rebbe said, then keep writing. Keep the contact, because in our day and age, he said, parents are all good children. Eventually they walk in the ways of their children. In other words, they will walk in the footsteps of you, and not in the reverse. The fulfillment of the prophecy that Hashem will bring back the hearts of the children to their parents and the parents to their children, that it'll be, and Rashi says, the children will be bringing back the parents. And that's the way it is, just to bombard them with love and contact and normal relationships within the framework of what Yiddishkeit allows. You cannot allow them to bring food that's not kosher into the home, or to in some way invade the Shabbos in a long way. One has to talk to a rabbi and get instruction of how to balance the Yiddishkeit. But experience shows that given time, they all fall into place, because they see that their child is happier, the families are happier. And I had a student whose father's initial reaction was, I wish my son would have rather gone on drugs than become a Baalei Teshuvah. That was actually his response initially. And today he is climbing nachas from his children and grandchildren, and he couldn't wish them to be in a better space. That's the experience that I've had. Eventually things do settle, and one just has to weather the storms as they come and deal them with kid gloves as is appropriate. Thank you.
Ja.
To go off so quickly.
It's
We gaan het even liever nog het diplomatie.
Oh.